Here are 5 things that I think you should know if you're thinking about switching to Linux. Hey everyone, what's happening? And first of all, I'd like to apologize for last video. That would be my EA anti-cheat video. Apparently it was in mono sound and it was really loud in the right ear and nothing else for people who are wearing headphones. And that was not intentional. Something got by me and somehow my microphone got locked in mono mode for some reason. And I didn't do it. I don't know why. But I had to literally hunt that down today. It took me like 40 minutes. But I fixed it. And here we go. So with that out of the way, let's dive into the first thing you should know about Linux. And that is that Linux is not Windows. If you're switching to Linux, you need to know this because they are fundamentally different in the way they operate and the way that they're laid out. Now, there might be some desktops that are very similar to Windows. However, with what's happening behind the hood and the way that settings are set, etc., it's still very different. And because it's different, you also have a lot of choice available to you. Like the choice of desktop environment, which allows you to choose how your computer will fundamentally operate as far as the graphic user interface, and a lot of different programs, etc. Also, if you are switching from Mac OS as well, it is not Mac OS either for the same reasons that it is not Windows. It's Linux. It's a Linux-based operating system. And this leads me into my next point. The next thing you need to know about switching to Linux is that it has a learning curve. Linux takes some time to learn whether you're coming from Windows or Mac OS. So you need to give yourself a little bit of time to learn the new operating system. Now, I always suggest to take an old computer that you may have around and install it on an old piece of hardware that you have and play around with it and get to know it before wiping out your computer and installing Linux on it. That will make it easier to learn Linux. Now, there are ways to make the learning curve easier, like choosing the right desktop environment. There are desktop environments that try to closely mimic the Windows experience, like the Cinnamon desktop with Linux Mint. That distribution, as far as Linux Mint goes, tries to make the transition from Windows to Linux easy, or as easy as it can be. However, it's not perfect, but it makes it easy. So, the right distribution and the right desktop environment can make it easier. So do your research, watch your videos, find out what distribution you might want to start with, and it'll make it easy. The next thing I'm going to cover about switching to Linux is that there's going to be no out-of-the-box user experience when you install a distribution. Most distributions are designed with configuration in mind so that you can configure your operating system and your user experience to you. So you're going to have to play around with it to get the right experience for you. So don't go out there looking for the perfect user experience by distro hopping from one distribution to another. I would say do your research first, see what would be the closest user experience that you would like to see, download and install that distro, and then stick with it and configure it to your liking. It'll be a lot easier for you to learn because some distributions do things differently. There are different package managers from distribution to distribution as far as installing packages and programs, etc. And also the update models are different from distribution to distribution. So I would highly suggest that you pick one and stick with it instead of trying to look for that perfect out-of-the-box distribution, because there isn't going to be one. I always say distribution does not matter, and it doesn't, because at the end of the day, when you learn it, Linux is Linux. Yes, there might be a different package manager, but then you can just take that package manager, you can learn it, but the thing is, you've learned the fundamentals, so you can just go ahead and then, once you learn that package manager, you know everything else, etc. The next thing you need to keep in mind when switching to Linux is that Windows programs are not natively supported by Linux. Now, there is a compatibility layer called Wine that allows you to run Windows programs inside of Linux. Now, I'm not going to go into detail there. However, this should not be something that you should be counting on. Wine compatibility, even though it is extremely good for what it is, actually, it is very good, it is not perfect. You are not guaranteed to be able to run every Windows program inside of it. So you are going to have to learn some new programs. If you're using Microsoft Office, a client that runs on your computer, that's not going to work in Wine. The only way you can use Microsoft Office is using the online client in your browser. However, we do have LibreOffice. That's the main one that everybody normally uses. But there are a few other options like WPS Office, SoftMaker Free Office, and OnlyOffice, and OpenOffice. However, you can still use the client if you want to that's built into your browser for Microsoft Office. That is also an option. And Google Docs also works in the cloud as well in your browser. But if you're using other programs, they're not necessarily guaranteed to work. Now, you can try them inside of Wine if you really have to have them, but some of them may not work, and you may have to keep Windows around for those programs that you absolutely have to have, where there is no open, free, or Linux version of those programs available to you. So keep that in mind when you're making the decision to switch. What you need your computer to do, what programs you need, and is there a Linux alternative? Or a Linux version of the software you're using. The last thing that I want to go over is that you do not have to be a computer nerd to use Linux. There was a time where you had to be very tech savvy to learn or use Linux. Those days are long over. Here in 2020, it is easier to learn and get into Linux than it has been before in the history of Linux-based operating systems. Some people have bought into the myth that you have to learn the terminal and a bunch of commands to be able to use Linux. That has not been the truth for a very, very long time. There is a GUI, graphical user interface, etc., whatever you want to call it, way to do things. You can do things through a graphical program, and the terminal options are still available as well. It is your choice. There are some people that don't ever touch the terminal, and they can get everything done in the desktop environment. It's however you want to do it. Linux is easy to learn these days if somebody is willing to learn. Now, with these 5 things in mind, I know that Linux is not for everybody. Not everybody is going to be able to use Linux. As much as I love it, I have to admit that. Some people, Mac OS is right for them. Some people, Windows is right for them. Some people, Linux is right for them. Use whatever is right for you. And if it's not Linux, then so be it. My purpose of presenting Linux is to offer you a choice. And if it's not Linux, then I hope you're enjoying your computer experience with whatever you're using. If you liked that video, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, that's what that thumbs down button is for. And if you're new, consider clicking that subscribe button. And I will see you in the next one. If you like my content and wish to support my work, you can do so on Patreon. The link is in the description. Also, if you wish to see more, check out the videos on your screen.